Hello, my bookhoes. Welcome back to another day of fantastical, frantic Halloween DIYs. If you've been following me, you know that I already did a cool pumpkin spice linen shirt that was a batwing yoke shirt with these beautiful bishop sleeves. And today I am going to make a matching skirt, although honestly, they don't have to be worn together. So let's make a cottagecore Halloween linen skirt today. Hello and welcome to Bookhoarding by Bianca. I'm Bianca and today we're gonna make another cool Halloween DIY. But first, reminder that while you're here, it'd be lovely if you liked, subscribed, and shared. Back to today's DIY. So, if you've been following me, you know that I have been going to fashion classes for the first time ever! And it's terrifying to rethink your life and your life choices in your 30s. But that's not what today's video is about. No, instead today is kind of actually low-key studying for a midterm. And guess what? You get rewarded and I get rewarded because while I'm studying, aka practicing the things that I've learned in my patterning class, you get to watch me go through patterning the skirt, and also it helps me study because it's me practicing making skirts. In this video, much like my Morticia skirt that I just did, I'm going to be walking you through drafting a custom pattern for yourself. I'll be doing it in half scale, and then I'll be doing it for myself in full scale, but the close-ups will be in half scale because it's a lot easier for me to film that. But the measurements will really be what you would need for yourself, which means that you would probably need a sloper. And a sloper is just a basic thing that closely fits your body and that you understand you're comfortable with, you know, where the seam allowance is, where the darts go, all of those good things, where the ease is. Honestly, there are tons of videos out there, which I'll link to again, that will walk you through making your own skirt sloper, or you can literally modify a really basic pencil skirt pretty much to suit your needs. So this skirt that I'm making today was 100% something that was out of my textbook, but something that I modified because I really liked the idea of having this fullness where it is. It reminded me a lot of the kind of continued style from panniers to the robe de style, where it was just like the kind of hip flares, these kind of fuller hip area things. I like that it gave proportion and flare in a different space than we're used to seeing. And it just felt very much like a cool kind of full skirt that had an interesting dynamic of fitted top, but flare and flat versus gathered spaces. I wanted to play with that not only for my patterning class, you know, just for me to work with both kinds of things in one garment. For my own design earlier in class, I'd made a different kind of flared hip gourd space just to see how that would play out, playing with proportions there. So I'm kind of intrigued with how those proportions work out, and I was really excited to kind of take something that was literally from sketch to pattern, you know, half scale to full-size pattern to full-size finished garment, which I haven't done a ton of yet, but I want to do more of, and I want to get used to it. So it was a little bit of like, I want to practice, I want to study, but also I think it was a really cool proportioned skirt. I will also say that after I finished my top for this pumpkin spice linen that I have, I realized that I really didn't have enough fabric to do a full circle skirt. So I decided to kind of do halfway, where I'm still gonna have some fullness, but there's fitted parts, and so between the two it's still gonna give me a nice kind of twirl, not the same as like a full circle, but it will still give me that, and I still will make decent use of my fabric. That being said, here are the materials you're going to need for today's skirt. Any kind of things that you want to make this out of, if you're making it with me, whether it's, you know, whatever fabric, whatever closures, if you want to do button closures and modify the pattern for that, I think it would be super cute. If you want to do color blocking for this, I think that'd be great. If you want to do tulle instead of what I did, like if you want to do a layered effect where it's tulle and like another diaphanous material, go for it, have fun with it. Embrace creativity and embrace whatever bits of fabric you have left of a project and just kind of run with it. I think I used about 3-ish yards altogether, but you know, math is not my strong suit. For the actual drafting the pattern, again, you'll need a sloper, which I talked about. and you will need all your pattern drafting materials. So I'd say, paper that you can, make big pieces out of, whether it's newspaper, pattern paper, which I do have some of, craft paper, wrapping paper, anything that's going to be able to make a long pattern to fit your body. You'll also need lots of rulers, measuring tape, pens, pencils, French curves, all those wonderful things you're going to need to measure and mark your pattern. Also tape. Tape is your friend. Along with scissors that are good for cutting paper or anything else, I use my trusty small rotary cutter that has a dull blade, so I decided to just convert it to my pattern rotary cutter on my table, and I think it works great. Okay, let's make this skirt. Okay, you're going to start with your basic sloper. Again, this is all what you're going to be using in full size, and this is half scale, so don't you worry about how tiny this looks, because I'm not this tiny. I'm petite, but not this tiny. So first thing you're going to want to do is figure out how deep you want to make the kind of yoke part that I'm making for this. Like, so where do you want the flare to kind of start? Where do you want it to stop? And then you're going to measure that out from the top, and you're going to follow the top of your sloper, because there's going to be a slight curve. So you wouldn't just make a straight line across. You would, measure down the same length from the top. Obviously, this could be more extreme depending on your sloper and your body, all those things. Use your French curves, which you can totally apparently find printable versions online. So be free, find printable and free things, because capitalism is a scam. Anyway, you're going to mark along that decided line from the top where you think that you want that flare to start, where you think you want the kind of yoke bit to start. I put in lines in case I separate my pattern. Those are notches, theoretically. They're just pen marks now, but if you have a notcher, you could be fancy, make a notcher. Then I'm going to mark the center princess seam down. And this is going to become my L-shaped front piece, or I guess my T-shaped one, because it's on a fold. T-shaped. We'll call it T-shaped. This will become that T-shaped piece. So then I'm going to start pulling in those darts. And really it's just changing where the dart is. So I'm cutting, leaving a single little piece of paper so that I can pivot that over. Now theoretically, I've just moved that dart into the line I'm continuing to cut. So no problem. The dart's there. That fullness is somewhere on the pattern. It's just no longer going to be darts. I'm doing the same thing for the other one. You can see here, just that easy. It's just that easy. Now I'm going to pull out and make some fullness along that hip space that I just used my hands to demonstrate Vanna White style. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's look at our pattern and figure out where we want to add it. Now, you could just add it off to the side, but I'm going to cut this out because part of the reason I did this was because I didn't have massive pieces of fabric left. So I put notches in so I'd know where things would line up. That's what notches are for, helping you line stuff up. I'm going to cut down for that added fullness panel. So this becomes its own panel. This will help me in a couple ways. Mostly, again, I didn't have enough things to really piece together a massive shape that if I'd kept it connected and then add the fullness that would have been. So we're just kind of winging it here and doing our best. I am now then going to cut that down the middle, and you would obviously, for this added fullness, measure out your fabric, measure out exactly how much fullness you want from this. I'm just using paper and I'm just kind of giving you an idea of how you would go about this, so it's not precise, it's not measured out. Just that's an FYI. Just hopefully that's helpful to know. Obviously, too, this is a thing where it's not just dependent on how much fabric, but what kind of fabric. Like if you did a solid underskirt that was shorter or not as full, and then you did massive tulle skirt over it, that could be really interesting, right? So you'd want to play with proportions there. So I just taped this little middle piece in. You do the same thing for full size, and then I'm going to blend out that edge and cut it off so it's the right height although it needs now seam allowance because we cut it out of something. So we need to add seam allowance to all this, most of the sides of this, which is fine. But this is how that would go together. You can see the top notch doesn't really matter anymore, but because we're going to gather, but that's at least helpful. So that's the center front piece. That will be on a fold. The back piece is going to look very, very similar, but it's not going to be on a fold because you need to have a way to get into your skirt. So that's just a reminder. Your back piece will not be on a fold. I mean, unless you put in a side zipper, and then that's your whole prerogative. I'm not going to deal with how you're getting that zipper in there. That's you and your life choices. Sorry. I'm marking, because it's my pattern, I can mark on it. I'm marking that's all going to be gathered. I'm marking that I'm actually going to be clever and make this side seam, instead of a seam, I'm going to make that a fold. So that piece will be doubled, and it will wrap around the back, because again, the back's going to have a very similar piece. And then I won't have to make a seam down the side of it. I'll just have one continuous piece, which isn't that bad. It's actually quite easy to work with, because ultimately it meant I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. 5 pieces of the skirt to work with. And I thought that was nice. So what am I doing here? I've cut this piece out of the sloper, and that means I need to add seam allowance. Yes, it does. Now, again, depending on your sloper, you would know where you've already added seam allowance. You need to remember those things and mark it. I put them in Sharpie on my personal patterns, just so that, like, while I'm working with them, I know, like, while I'm working with the quote working pattern, before I make a quote final pattern. What's really final in life besides, you know, I guess death. So I'm just adding that half scale seam allowance, and that's what that line is. It's just so that you know to remember to add seam allowance when you cut things out. I hope that's it. Like, I hope visually seeing me do it is at least helpful to remember how you are supposed to do that. I mean, theoretically, that left side, I should potentially add seam allowance. It would add fullness, but I'm like, you know what? It's fine. Like, if that had been a seam, we need seam allowance. But since it's just part of a larger gathered piece and there's enough space that that's going to be fine, it's, you know, it's a thing. I'm also going to add seam allowance to this part, because guess what? We also cut that out. And we need to sew that to something. So to maintain that line, that style line that we've made, we got to add seam allowance. And I accidentally got a hair on my tape. It's okay. You know, if I'm not shedding, it's the rabbits. And that's what happens when you have fluffy rabbits. It's fine. And then you're just going to do the same thing for the inside seams here. You're just going to add your seam allowance again. Half scale. You're not going to need, I don't even know what I'm doing, 1/4 of an inch. You're probably going to need whatever's comfortable for you. For this slight curve, what I do is I'll just line up the ruler so it exactly matches that line. You can see that the far one is kind of, I feel like I was off on that measurement, but okay. That's how we're in half scale. I mean, you can also theoretically do muslin on these, right? So, I mean, who does muslins? I mean, I know I'm supposed to do muslins, but like, come on. You know it's gonna fit. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Theoretically, too, you'd add seam allowance to the side and the top. But I'm just trying to visually show you, like, when you cut a piece out of the sloper, you need to add seam allowance. So the back is pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same. You're going to tilt those darts in. You're going to make that L shape. You're going to make the pattern to go in there, which you already did because I did the front. So then this is just really fast me tracing my slopers and cutting them out and doing the exact thing we just talked about. The other thing I didn't mention was adding length. My sloper is longer, I think, than like this half scale I'm using proportionally. So like that's just an FYI. measure yourself, measure where you want things to go. So I am now going to I have a 1 dart slipper, so it's going to be a little different for me. And I'm just going to do exactly what I did on the front. So, okay, now I'm just going to cut out those pieces so you can see that I've got one that is on the fold, and then I have a set of 2 that have a seam because I will need to put in a zipper or some kind of closure. I did consider putting in buttons, but you know, whatever. And then those are the 2 sides that are going to be gathered. And I'm getting ready to sew now. It was pretty easy. Like, the pattern and cutting out pieces is pretty easy. And now I have to wind a bunch of bobbins. So before I start any project, I actually wind a few bobbins that match the fabric I'm working with so that I have it, especially if I know it's going to be like, if you have a hem, you're going to need at least 1 extra bobbin because, let's be real, it's going to take a second. So I'm just pinning things in place, getting ready to sew. And I am now sewing pieces together. Riveting, I know. So this was like, it came together really easily, and I feel like you could probably sew it in whichever ways makes sense to you. But the first thing I did was actually sew the top, quote, yoke bits together, the things that go around your hips, because I'm just going to be inserting that one long piece that I cut on the fold and gathering it between the 2. So I figured I might as well just sew those pieces together now, roll those seams in so they're nice and finished, at least for that part, and go from there. Okay, so after you've done your 2 sides, it is now time to start gathering and pinning that little flare piece. It's hard to see what I'm doing here, but I'm basically just pinning the 2 sides, the 2 sides of that opening, and then the center to the center seam on the side so that I can get that placement. And then what I'm doing is I'm hand gathering the first round. Linen it frays a lot, so if you know the magic of using your machine to help you with gathers, you do that. But I was trying to be very delicate with this fabric, so I'm just hand gathering and pinning in place before I sew it down, which I do right here. The magic of video. So I'm just sewing down those gathers into the little area that they're gonna go into around the hips. And then here they are. This fabric wrinkles as soon as you look at it. I have ironed it so many times. Whatever. So there are the little gathers in on the side. Now I'm going to do a quick lining. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but basically it's just I'm putting interfacing on these pieces that I've cut out. I mean, I had to take out the iron and do all this stuff. What did I do with this? Oh, make sure that you have the sticky side down. Don't forget, sticky side down to the fabric. Just pay attention to that. That's really important. For this, I just used that top yoke bit, and I cut out that kind of piece that goes down to make that long L shape or T shape, whatever you want to call it. That's all I did. I just like outlined it and then cut that part off to make those pieces for the lining, because I want the top to be a little bit more reinforced. And then I'm just cutting off the excess of this center facing. So now I have the pieces, there we go, sewn and tacked in, ready to go, pinned onto the skirt. And we're going to sew in this lining. Now, you don't have to do this. You can do this and like make a whole lined skirt out of this, whatever you want. I wanted this for that kind of extra support up top, extra structure up top, and also because I might do pockets later, and I feel like this will help it. And I tried it on finally. Yay! I don't think I have footage of putting the zipper in, which is actually a blessing because that was a nightmare and I need to actually redo one part of the zipper. Anyway, I'm done! Ta-da! I finished the skirt. I'm really excited. I think it looks really cute. I'm wearing it right now. It's off camera. You can't see it. It's right there. But like, I think it's adorable. I know it's not standard. I know it's not like a maybe contemporary silhouette, but I kind of really like it. And again, I like playing with proportions. And I like kind of playing with these kind of allusions to historical things. So it was just a nice way to play with some fabric that I had left, make a kind of mix and match kind of autumnal wardrobe that I'm slowly building up to, and also, you know, practice. As you can see from when I was doing the half scale, this is a fairly simple pattern once you really get down to it. But, you know, it all comes down to how it's executed and how you change things up. Like, I gave myself way more of like a high-waisted space. I knew that I'd probably be layering it with, you know, maybe a Victorian or Edwardian looking things to give it a little bit more of that extreme kind of silhouette. And that's fine. I just think it's a fun thing. So it's definitely, hopefully helpful for you to see at least how those things are plotted out, and you can add that kind of body any way you want to things. I've definitely seen some Alexander McQueen and other designers playing with that kind of hip flare area. And I'm also firmly believe that like, you don't have to be a stick thin model just to try out silhouettes. Like, you know what? You're free to not like how you look in something, but I don't think that like just because high fashion is modeled on stick thin people, we have to limit ourselves to that. Now for this skirt, I will probably eventually be adding pockets to it. I was mostly working again off of a patterning thing from the book, which we haven't really gotten to inserting pockets yet and doing all that stuff. So I might actually hold off on the pockets until that part of my class has commenced. And as far as the insides, a lot of the insides seams on this are unfinished. I did hem it, but you know, the inside of this, if you looked up disaster in the dictionary, that's probably what you would see, because linen just, it frays. It might also be fraying because Scrap Monster cursed me earlier in the season.
Promises. May your linen fray upon washing.
But that's a different story. Big thank you for sticking around for this really kind of fun, interesting make. I hope it was, again, useful for you to like see the process from start to finish. I know it's helpful for me to study. And massive shout out to my patrons, because without you, I could not be doing any of this. Legit, y'all are immensely helpful. You've gotten me to where I am, and like, thank you so much. If you're not a patron yet, you can check out the link in my profile to find out more. Also, in my description, I will have a link to my Ko-fi where you can leave me a tip if you like what you see. Literally anything helps me make this work, make this happen, and share the things that I'm learning, and help pay for supplies for me to like not only do the things but also teach the things. And if you make any of my makes, please tag me on Instagram, or if you watch these while you're making something, I'd love to know what you're making, because I know that I'm often hand sewing or doing other things like making lace while I'm watching other people's videos. So like, make sure to tag me on Instagram in your stories or in whatever if you're watching these videos. My Instagram tag is @Bianca_Hernandez, so just, yeah, tag me and I would love to see your work. All right, it's time to say farewell. Thank you for joining me for yet another wonderful, chaotic crafting session. Shout out to my patrons at my Lizzie Bennett tier and above. Don't forget that everybody from the lowest tier up gets to join my Discord server, the Jane Austen Avocado Toast Society, where we get to talk about things that we make and that we do, and you get to see a ton of sneak peeks of things that I'm randomly working on in my sewing room that are adjacent to my classwork. And with that, don't forget to make it so.